John.
Okay. So
okay, now we got that out of the way. My own film way.
Okay.
Let me be ready. Let me get camera ready.
First, now tell me.
You gotta give me a roguelike.
I got you.
Because I don't know where you're posting this and shit.
Tell me your story. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What was your family like? And how did that make you the person you are today?
Ooh. So I was born and raised in North Carolina. We're on, right?
Yes.
I had it. So born and raised in North Carolina. Small farm town. So very conservative, religious, like we're Southern Baptist, so fire and brimstone, like very in your face about belief systems and principles. So, growing up, in that kind of setting, it's like basically it's the cultural thing where it's religious. You didn't get to ask questions, right? So you're just born into, it's like a social hierarchy to grow up in the church. And, my church, it was white, majority white. Like we had my youth group I think a total of 3 black individuals, and they were all the same family, right? And their parents actually, they adopted them. So yes, they were like black individuals, but like association with like heritage and what we could understand, to be an understanding of connection with black individuals in the church, like that's not existent in my church. And I grew up like, middle like class, like I was definitely privileged, like still am, but like didn't really suffer. So those are the people I grew up around. But my parents, we were fair weather Christians, but like I grew up in a very I had childhood trauma. So my parents, I just grew up in an unstable household, right? So my understanding of what love and acceptance was, didn't learn any of that from them. And while I was growing up, like looking back on my parents, especially my father, he would say things that were like just obviously like racist. But like back then, I didn't have any conception of it, right? So he would call like porch monkeys, thugs, like things like clearly racist things. But I didn't have an understanding of that because it's just I hadn't been around enough culture. And then my whole family, like honestly, like just subconsciously racist, like just without really knowing it, which honestly to me is the worst kind. Well, the thing was that
because and as you got older, growing up in
like growing up in a trauma-ridden like household, it's like you're basically in a constant state of like confusion of really like your own introspection, right, and your own emotional intelligence. So how it made me feel towards them, or just as a whole, like as far as like racism and systemic oppression, and how that manifests. It's hard to conceptualize and articulate just because growing up, like there were so many problems in my own household. Like my parents, like they never loved each other. Just so there were so many other issues, so much noise in my household. Yeah, and my mother, personality disorder, borderline. So if you don't even think about that, it's one of the worst personality disorders. So we were at war with my mother using us as pawns, to make herself feel better. So my sister was body shaming and fat shaming growing up, which like now looking back on it, we clearly like just always talked about her weight. And for me, I'm ADHD, like so suffered like severely, and but my parents didn't understand mentors. My mother like just always say like, why can't you? What's up, my man? Oh, you're good. Yeah.
Okay, we're in the middle of an interview. Have a good one, though. God bless. So I had to deal with that, like growing up, right? So, like, I just basically told I could never, nothing I could do was ever good enough, or like you're so smart, why can't you understand this? So, I battling that, just battling all those other things, like it definitely seeped in subconsciously. And as I got older, I started to realize it. So when I got to, I think, high school, I really started to kind of, click. Because I've always, like, I love black individuals. I've always been around black individuals. And my high school, and my middle school, white youth were the minority, especially in my high school when I was a drummer. Like I just always been around black individuals. I love black people, so I just don't. It doesn't register to me like it's just that way of thinking. But as far as how made you feel, I don't think it really.
Did it make you feel more separated from your family?
Absolutely. I mean, I never felt close, like really to my family, for a lot of reasons. But especially that, but when I was younger, like I said, the things that your parents would say, like calling black dogs, like porch monkeys, like I didn't have enough, life experience to really understand, the fullness, of their racism. Right? So, it definitely made me feel separated, for sure. But my father was one of those people. It's like subconscious racism. It's like contextual racism. Like if you sing with black individuals, kindest man in the world. So that that was confusing. So I think his racism stems from his own trauma, growing up in the 50s, Jim Crow. So and just using justification. So it was confusing seeing that from him. Because he is still racist, but it's just subconscious, so it's just mixed signals from him, right? He would use things like why they, NFL players have to kneel during the national anthem, or it's just why, when police would murder innocent black individuals and during the riots, he would just focus on looting and things like that. So it's just, but you see him with black individuals, and he's honestly not racist, within those moments. So it's. When you grow up with something like that, it's even more confusing. So because I think it's contextual racism, and then it's really more, I think,
circumstantial.
Yeah, like my father using, I think, racism as justification to not have to look at himself. So I think it was after my senior year. I think I was 24 maybe. 25. I knew that I wasn't this anymore. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. So I think that's really when I started to understand racism in its full scale, because I was able to separate myself from church, and then so it started to click more and more, and then I went through a very traumatic, just horrible experience with someone who's my partner who I've lived with 2 years, and then I just had a light bulb moment. I had to have something very, very traumatic happen to really just have that light click, and then I moved thousands of miles away to Salt Lake City, and that's really when it full scale all clicks. So I had to have a catalyst. All the tools were there, to know my family is this way, this way it is, but I had to go into the unknown, right? I had to experience something terrifying and unknown to me, and escape comes to being comfortable, because humans are creatures of comfort, right? Even if something is terrible. So while I knew, inherently that my family, they are this way, they are racist, I had to actually separate myself thousands of miles away, and really see them from a completely objective lens. And then when you separate yourself from your loved ones, and you just do that independently, you really start to see people who they are, especially your loved ones, because those things come out, those toxic things, more and more, and because they'll try to use it against you. So I think that experience, and then I feel like systemic racism has gotten so much worse now that I always had, but it's just so much even worse than days of Rodney King, and then just growing up, it just feels so much worse. Honestly, it feels just so much more apathy towards it. Ahmaud Arbery, that where you just see, Eric Garner, we see these things, and Eric Garner gave, we have videos of this, black individuals just being murdered by a badge, no repercussions, and what are you doing? Are we focusing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're getting the good stuff. Yeah, I see what's happening. though, like, I mean, there's like moments like they bother you, right? Like I just see it. And you know, people I grew up with, acquaintances, and went to school with, and my family, like it's just you be on Facebook or like you never hear anything from them, right? But I see all these moments, and like I know that they're happening, and they pain me. But because I really rock with Black individuals, like I love Black people, they knew where where I am on that side of the fence. So I never had to prove myself to them or make it like they just know me. But then I think Ahmaud Arbery, when that happened, so many of the people I grew up with like came out of the woodwork, right, about that specifically. Just people who never said anything about systemic racism or just murdering innocent Black individuals by badge, and they were just like, I have to speak up. Like I can't stay silent anymore about this. I don't care who knows or who I lose in the process, friends or family. And it's like, well, the reason they're all speaking up, especially about Ahmaud Arbery, like, and it was terrible what happened to him. I'm not taking anything away from that. But the reason that they can speak up about that is because what was he doing? He was running. Just running, and running not from police, right? Running for extras, and that's something they can relate to because that's generally a majority white sport, and like something that white people do. Even though Kenyans are the best at it, just like they could relate to that, and so they're like, oh my God, like I do that, right? So, and it was a very just profound like moment just to see so many people that I grew up with who never had anything to say about systemic racism or murdering of innocent Black individuals, just to have them all come out, and it made me very like it was livid. Totally. Now I didn't say anything to any of them because I knew what they were doing. And then like a year later, or a year and a half later, was it George Floyd? A year and a half later, I think, or 2 years later. I think it was 2 years later. And like I said, I'm not taking away anything from Ahmaud Arbery, but like watching the George Floyd video, that like broke. Like I've seen like the rest of the videos. Like I've seen all of them, but like George Floyd just bawled. I can only watch it one time. Just bawled my eyes out. So what I hated about all of that is that all of these people who had something to say about Ahmaud Arbery, not one of them had one thing to say about what happened to George Floyd. Not one. And that, like, it's hypocritical, and like just that's what made me angry. Like you see these individuals, and George Floyd, like obviously none of them watched the full video because they would have to say something. A man gets his neck kneeled on for 8 minutes. People pleading to get off. Like you see Ahmaud Arbery, where it's not compared. It's really not. It's night and day. I'm not taking anything away from what happened to him, but it's just a night and day difference. And none of these individuals had one thing to say, and so I think that's really, where it came to fruition. Manifest for me, where I truly stand. Like I said, for you, Black Lives Matter, what we're talking about, people that say they support it, if you wouldn't actually say that you're willing to die for it, if you're not willing to die for that, you don't support it. You don't support it. You really don't. You can say you do, but if you're not willing to die for that, you're just fair weather. It's fair weather, and you just want to take some of your white guilt. It's white guilt. You want to take that white guilt off of you. That's what you want to do. And that's just the truth of it. And unfortunately, we live in a world where too many people aren't really, they're not ready for that conversation. They're not willing to die for that. But yeah, that moment, and then just seeing no one say anything about George Floyd, and then my family, I think that's where we really kind of started really separating, because I was in the intense protesting, front lines where they had the riot police in Salt Lake City, live streamed it, I was there, where they look like Call of Duty. They just have more weaponry and firepower than any police force can ever have. And so I'm just there, and you're just seeing what it's really like to be there, in those moments, and where most people especially my parents and just the people you see on TV, just talk about the looting and all that. Like they've never fucking been. Sorry, they've never. This is professional. I'm sorry. Passion. They've never been anywhere close to any of that. They just see it and they don't want to understand it. And this thing is like, that's what being ignored and systemic pressure. That's what that causes. This is what this causes. Because if no one's listening, what else are you supposed to do? I would too. I would light the entire city on fire. Like, and this also the thing is like, you know, Boston Tea Party. What do you think that was? Then they call it revolution. White individuals do revolution. They don't call it rioting or looting. And then also though, it's more angry. It's like, you know, why is it they're only focused on like looting, not the shooting? So I made a post. It was a meme. It wasn't directed towards my father necessarily. It was really just anyone, like, and everyone who I had it with on Facebook. It was like fair weather moderate people, and the meme basically said like, you know, for all those who just are only focused on the looting but not the shooting, I see y'all. Very profound. Like comedy, a way to use my voice. That's what's great about being a comedian. It's like that really is that last question fun is that I am like violent and raw on stage. Like I talk about things and we're gonna make people uncomfortable. I'll still make it funny, but I'm gonna split a room. I'm polarizing, very polarizing. So I'll make you laugh and cry all in the same joke. It's just truth. It's just, you know, Dave Chappelle, like, Bill Burr, it's very in your face. Because I talk about real issues. Like I'm not like Jerry Seinfeld talking about airplane food. Like I talk about the things that we need to talk about. And humor disarms though. So you can have like a room of just random strangers, 300 people. And what I love about comedy, you can have like a neo-Nazi, and you can have like a Black Panther, you can have somebody that's, you know, gay, straight, pink, polka dot, homophobic, transphobic. It doesn't matter. If you can take something universally relative that everyone can relate to, and you can articulate it in a way that they've never thought about and they never put on their own, and you can also make it funny, they're going to forget who they are and where they are in that moment. They're going to forget who they hate or why they think they hate them, and they're just going to laugh and share that moment, right? And that's going to change the way they think fundamentally. Like, even though it's just a comedy show, if you talk about something real, it's just in that moment, it's just going to change the way they think about their life. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to use that, like to be able to take the hate and just flip it on its head. And they didn't even get a choice. They didn't get even choice in the matter. It's just that's what's great about humor. It's just, and they don't realize it. They didn't get a choice to decide whether or not they laughed at it or appreciated it. And that's because, especially when you're really a comedian, you can just do that. You can talk about those real issues, and when they laugh, they're validating the way you see the world and your truth, and just that's going to change the way that they think about their bias and their own prejudice. So, that's a mouthful, but like I think that's a good synopsis. Unless I just want to thank my counterpart, the very Hebrew name.
Yeshara,
for having me, because these are the conversations that need to be had, honestly. So, more people, especially more white people, just need to have them. And we're sitting right here in the subway station. I've already seen so many white people come by. They're so uncomfortable, and I'm not uncomfortable at all, making me feel more uncomfortable for walking away. So you have to. The world's not going to change on its own.